Sarah Martinez had always been invisible at Westfield High School. While her classmates drove to school in their parents' luxury cars, she walked 2 miles every morning, her worn sneakers splashing through puddles when it rained. Her clothes came from thrift stores, carefully chosen to hide the patches her grandmother sewed on by hand. She carried her books in a backpack that had seen better days, its zipper held together with safety pins. The popular kids at Westfield seemed to live in a different world entirely. Jessica Thompson arrived each day in her father's BMW, her designer handbag swinging carelessly from her shoulder. Brad Wilson pulled up in his red Mustang, music blasting, surrounded by friends who hung on his every word. They lived in a wealthy part of town, where houses had circular driveways and manicured lawns that looked like something from a magazine. Sarah's world was smaller and quieter. She lived with her grandmother, Maria, in a tiny apartment above the corner grocery store. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was 12, leaving her with nothing but memories and the few possessions they could fit into their small space. Maria worked double shifts at the local diner, her hands rough from years of washing dishes and her back bent from carrying heavy trays. Despite their struggles, she made sure Sarah had everything she needed for school, even if it meant going without herself. Every morning, Sarah would wake before dawn to help her grandmother prepare breakfast for the early customers at the diner. She would slice vegetables, brew coffee, and clean tables before rushing to school. Her classmates never knew about these morning routines, never saw her washing grease from under her fingernails in the school bathroom, trying to erase any trace of her other life. At school, Sarah was a ghost. She sat in the back of every classroom, raising her hand only when she was certain of the answer. Her grades were exceptional, but that seemed to make her even more invisible to her peers. While other students struggled with algebra, she solved equations in her head. When the English teacher assigned Shakespeare, she had already read the entire play twice. But academic success meant nothing in the social hierarchy of high school. The cafeteria was where the invisible barriers became most obvious. Sarah would sit alone at a corner table, eating the lunch her grandmother packed in a brown paper bag. Across the room, the popular table buzzed with conversation about weekend parties, new clothes, and vacation plans. Jessica and her friends would flip their hair and laugh loudly, their voices carrying across the entire cafeteria. They talked about shopping trips to the mall, about concerts their parents bought them tickets to, about college applications to schools that cost more per year than Sarah's family made in total. Sometimes, Sarah would catch fragments of their conversations. They complained about homework they found too difficult, about parents who bought them the wrong color car, about teachers who expected too much. Sarah listened and wondered what it would be like to have such problems. Her biggest worry was whether her grandmother could afford to keep the heat on during winter or whether their ancient washing machine would survive another month. The whispers started in sophomore year. Sarah had always been quiet, but her classmates began to notice her in the worst possible way. They saw her walking to school when the weather was terrible, saw her mending her backpack during lunch, saw her wearing the same few outfits in rotation. The whispers turned into pointed comments, usually delivered just loud enough for her to hear. "Look at her shoes," someone would say as she walked past. "I think those are from the 1980s. Did you see her eating that sad sandwich again? Doesn't she know there's actual food in the cafeteria? My mom says her grandmother cleans tables at that gross diner downtown. No wonder she always smells like grease." Sarah learned to keep her head down and her earbuds in, even when they weren't playing music. She learned to take longer routes to her classes to avoid the popular crowd. She learned to eat lunch in the library instead of the cafeteria, telling herself she preferred the quiet anyway. But the comments followed her everywhere, growing bolder as her tormentors realized she wouldn't fight back. The worst incident happened during junior year. Sarah had been working on a presentation about aerospace engineering for her physics class. She had spent weeks researching, staying up late in the library because their apartment's internet was too slow for detailed research. She was passionate about the subject, dreaming of designing aircraft that could reach the stars. When she presented her project, her teacher was impressed. She had created detailed diagrams and explained complex concepts with clarity that surprised everyone in the room. After class, Jessica cornered her in the hallway. "Nice presentation, Rocket Girl," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Too bad you'll never afford to fly in anything fancier than a city bus." Her friends giggled, and Sarah felt her cheeks burn with shame. She wanted to defend herself, to explain that her dreams were bigger than Jessica could imagine, but the words stuck in her throat. That evening, Sarah walked home in the rain, her presentation materials soggy in her arms. She found her grandmother waiting with hot chocolate and a plate of cookies she had brought home from the diner. "How was school, Mija?" Maria asked, her kind eyes studying Sarah's face. "Fine," Sarah lied, forcing a smile. She couldn't bear to tell her grandmother about the daily humiliations, about the way her classmates treated her like she was less than human. Maria worked too hard to provide for them both. She didn't need to worry about high school drama on top of everything else. But Maria was wiser than Sarah gave her credit for. She had seen the sadness in her granddaughter's eyes, had noticed how Sarah had stopped talking about her classmates months ago. That night, after Sarah had gone to bed, Maria sat at their small kitchen table and made a decision. She pulled out a notebook and began writing, her weathered hands moving carefully across the page. Sarah's life continued in its quiet routine. She studied harder than ever, throwing herself into books and assignments as an escape from the social torture of school. She spent her free time in the library, reading about aviation and engineering, about strong women who had broken barriers in fields dominated by men. She read about Amelia Earhart and Jacqueline Cochran, about test pilots who had risked everything to push the boundaries of flight. Her favorite book was about military aviation, filled with stories of brave pilots who flew dangerous missions to protect others. She studied the technical specifications of different aircraft, memorizing details about engines and navigation systems. In her mind, she was already flying, soaring above the petty concerns of high school, and into a future where her intelligence and determination mattered more than the brand of her clothes. The cruel comments continued throughout her junior and senior years. Her classmates had grown bolder, no longer bothering to whisper their insults. They would openly laugh when she walked past, pointing out her secondhand clothes and worn shoes. Some would make airplane noises when she entered the room, mocking her known interest in aviation. "There goes the pilot," they would say. "Hope she doesn't crash and burn like everything else in her life." Sarah learned to armor herself with silence and focus. She maintained her perfect grades while working part-time at her grandmother's diner, saving every penny she could. She applied for scholarships, writing essay after essay about overcoming adversity and pursuing her dreams despite obstacles. College seemed like her only escape route, a chance to leave Westfield and its narrow-minded residents behind forever. During her final semester, the talk turned to the 10-year reunion. Students discussed their plans for college, their career goals, their expectations for the future. Sarah listened to their confident predictions about success and wealth, about the amazing lives they would build after graduation. She said nothing about her own plans, keeping her acceptance letter to the State University's aerospace engineering program tucked safely in her locker. The day of graduation arrived with little fanfare for Sarah. Her grandmother sat proudly in the audience, wearing her best dress and dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Sarah walked across the stage to accept her diploma, her heart racing not from nervousness, but from excitement about what lay ahead. As she shook the principal's hand, she caught sight of Jessica and her friends in the audience, already planning their summer vacations and college parties. After the ceremony, Sarah and Maria celebrated with dinner at their favorite pizza place. "I'm so proud of you, Mija," her grandmother said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "You're going to do amazing things." Sarah smiled, but part of her felt hollow. She had survived high school, but the years of ridicule had left their mark. She wondered if she would ever be able to forget the feeling of being nobody, of being dismissed and mocked by people who had never bothered to know her at all. As she packed her belongings for college, She promised herself that she would never let anyone make her feel invisible again. The summer passed quickly as Sarah prepared for her new life. She worked extra shifts at the diner, saving money for textbooks and living expenses. She spent her evenings reading about aircraft design and military aviation, her excitement growing with each page. College represented more than just an education. It was her chance to prove that the nobody girl from Westfield High School had been somebody all along. As she boarded the bus for the state university, Sarah looked back at the small town that had shaped her in ways both painful and profound. Her grandmother waved from the platform, tears streaming down her face, but her smile radiant with pride. Sarah pressed her hand against the window and made a silent vow. She would return to Westfield someday, but when she did, she would be someone none of them would recognize. The quiet girl who had walked to school in worn shoes would be transformed into something magnificent, something that would force them all to see her clearly for the first time. College opened like a door to another universe for Sarah. The state university's campus sprawled across hundreds of acres, filled with students from every background imaginable. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the poor girl or the nobody. She was simply Sarah Martinez, aerospace engineering student, and that identity felt like freedom itself. Her roommate, Jenny, came from a middle-class family in Chicago and treated Sarah with casual friendliness that felt revolutionary after years of high school isolation. Jenny didn't care that Sarah's clothes came from discount stores or that she worked in the dining hall to help pay for her education. In fact, Jenny admired Sarah's work ethic and determination, often staying up late to study alongside her new friend. The engineering program was brutally difficult, designed to weed out students who weren't completely committed to the field. Sarah thrived under the pressure. While other students struggled with calculus and physics, she absorbed the concepts like a sponge, soaking up water. Her professors began to notice her exceptional performance, particularly in aerodynamics and propulsion systems. Dr. Williams, her favorite professor, pulled her aside after a particularly challenging exam. "You scored the highest in the class again," he said, adjusting his glasses as he looked at her paper. "Have you considered applying for the military aviation program? The Air Force has scholarships for students like you." Sarah's heart raced at the suggestion. She had dreamed of flying since childhood, but military aviation had always seemed impossible for someone from her background. "I've thought about it," she admitted, "but I don't know if I'm the right type of person for the military." Dr. Williams laughed. "The military needs intelligent, dedicated people who can think under pressure. You've demonstrated all of those qualities. They don't care where you come from, only what you can contribute." He handed her a brochure about the Air Force ROTC program. "Think about it. You could be flying by the time your classmates are still trying to find jobs." That evening, Sarah spread the ROTC materials across her dorm room desk. The scholarship would cover her remaining tuition and provide a monthly stipend. More importantly, it would guarantee her a path into military aviation, where she could train on some of the most advanced aircraft in the world. She thought about her grandmother, working double shifts to help support her education, and knew what she had to do. The ROTC program transformed Sarah in ways she hadn't expected. The physical training was grueling, with early morning runs and weekend field exercises that pushed her to her limits. But she discovered reserves of strength she never knew she possessed. The discipline and structure appealed to her methodical mind, while the teamwork aspects taught her to trust others in ways she had never learned in high school. Her fellow cadets came from diverse backgrounds, but they were united by their shared commitment to service. For the first time, Sarah found herself part of a group where intelligence and dedication were valued above social status or family wealth. She made friends who judged her by her performance rather than her appearance, who respected her for her abilities rather than dismissing her for her circumstances. Captain Rodriguez, the ROTC instructor, quickly identified Sarah as leadership material. She was promoted to cadet sergeant during her sophomore year, responsible for training younger students and organizing unit activities. The shy girl who had hidden in the back of classrooms was learning to command respect and lead others towards shared goals. You have natural leadership instincts, Captain Rodriguez told her after a successful training exercise. The Air Force needs officers who can think independently and inspire confidence in others. You have both qualities in abundance. Sarah's academic performance continued to excel as she balanced engineering coursework with military training. She specialized in aerospace systems, focusing on fighter aircraft and their complex technological requirements. Her senior thesis explored advanced propulsion systems for next-generation military aircraft, earning praise from both civilian professors and military advisors. During her junior year, Sarah received notification that she had been selected for pilot training. The news arrived in a simple white envelope, but its contents represented the culmination of years of hard work and determination. She would report to flight training immediately after graduation, beginning a journey that would take her from basic flight instruction to advanced fighter pilot certification. The night she received her acceptance letter, Sarah called her grandmother with trembling hands. "Abuela, I'm going to be a pilot," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. A real Air Force pilot. Maria's silence stretched across the phone line before she began to cry. "I always knew you would fly, Mija," she whispered. "Even when you were little, you would point at airplanes and tell me you were going to touch the sky someday. I'm so proud of you." Flight training proved to be the most challenging experience of Sarah's life. The program was designed to push candidates to their absolute limits, testing not just their technical skills, but their mental resilience and decision-making abilities under extreme pressure. Many of her fellow trainees washed out within the first few months, unable to handle the intensity of the instruction. Sarah not only survived, but excelled. Her engineering background gave her an intuitive understanding of aircraft systems that impressed her instructors. Her ability to remain calm under pressure, developed during years of enduring high school humiliation, served her well when dealing with emergency procedures and complex flight scenarios. Flight instructor Major Thompson became her mentor, recognizing Sarah's exceptional potential during basic flight training. "You have the instincts of a natural pilot," he told her after a particularly challenging navigation exercise. "But more than that, you have the intelligence to understand why the aircraft responds the way it does." That combination is rare. As Sarah progressed through increasingly advanced aircraft, her confidence grew. She flew trainer aircraft first, mastering basic flight principles before moving to more complex jets. Each step up the ladder brought new challenges and responsibilities. She learned air-to-air combat techniques, ground attack procedures, and advanced navigation systems that pushed the boundaries of technology. Her instructors began discussing her potential assignment to fighter aircraft. The F-16 Fighting Falcon was mentioned, along with the possibility of training on even more advanced systems. Sarah studied aircraft specifications with the same intensity she had once applied to her high school homework, memorizing technical details and tactical procedures that would keep her alive in combat situations. During her final year of training, Sarah received an unexpected opportunity. A demonstration flight program needed volunteers to showcase Air Force capabilities to civilian audiences. The program involved flying air shows and participating in recruitment events, giving experienced pilots the chance to represent their service to the public. Sarah volunteered immediately, recognizing the opportunity to combine her love of flying with public service. The demonstration flights required precision flying skills and the ability to communicate complex technical information to civilian audiences. She excelled at both aspects, earning recognition from program coordinators who were impressed by her technical knowledge and professional demeanor. The airshow circuit took Sarah across the country, performing in front of crowds that ranged from a few hundred to several thousand people. She flew formation flights with other demonstration pilots, executed precision maneuvers that showcased the capabilities of modern military aircraft, and participated in ground displays where she explained aircraft systems to curious spectators. Each air show reminded Sarah of how far she had traveled from her humble beginnings in Westfield. She stood beside multi-million-dollar aircraft, wearing the uniform of a United States Air Force officer, explaining complex aviation concepts to audiences that hung on her every word. The transformation was so complete that sometimes she had difficulty recognizing herself. Between air shows, Sarah continued her regular military duties, flying training missions, and maintaining her qualifications on multiple aircraft types. Her superiors began discussing advanced assignments that would take her career to even higher levels. Special operations units expressed interest in recruiting her, attracted by her combination of technical skills and proven performance under pressure. One evening, while reviewing her schedule for the upcoming air show season, Sarah noticed an event that made her heart skip a beat. The Regional Air and Space Expo was scheduled for the weekend of her 10-year high school reunion. The event was being held at the regional airport, less than 30 miles from Westfield, and the Air Force demonstration team was scheduled to perform. Sarah stared at the dates on her calendar, a plan beginning to form in her mind. The reunion invitation had arrived months earlier, forwarded through her grandmother's address. She had thrown it away without a second thought, having no desire to return to the scene of her adolescent torment. But this air show represented something different entirely. She called the reunion committee, using her grandmother's phone number as a contact point. The woman who answered sounded surprised to hear from her, clearly struggling to place her name among the graduating class. Sarah Martinez? Oh yes, I remember you now. Will you be attending the reunion? I'll be in the area, Sarah replied carefully. I'm not sure about the formal dinner, but I might stop by if my schedule permits. The woman's tone became more interested when Sarah mentioned her military service. Oh, how exciting. What do you do in the Air Force? Sarah smiled, thinking about the Apache helicopter she had recently been certified to fly. The massive attack helicopter represented the pinnacle of military aviation technology, a machine she had mastered after years of dedicated training. I'm a pilot, she said simply. I fly helicopters. As the date approached, Sarah found herself both nervous and excited about the possibility of returning to Westfield. She had transformed herself so completely that she wondered if anyone would even recognize her. The quiet, invisible girl they had mocked and ridiculed had become a confident military officer and skilled pilot. More importantly, she had become someone who knew her own worth regardless of what others thought. The final weeks before the air show were filled with preparation and rehearsals. Sarah reviewed every aspect of her demonstration flight, ensuring that her performance would be flawless. She studied the technical specifications of the Apache helicopter she would be flying, a machine so advanced and powerful that it represented the cutting edge of military aviation technology. The night before departure for the air show, Sarah called her grandmother one final time. I might stop by the reunion tomorrow, she said casually, not wanting to make too big a deal of the decision. Maria was quiet for a moment before responding. You should go, Mija. Show them who you really are. Show them who you've always been. Her voice carried a note of fierce pride that made Sarah's chest tighten with emotion. As Sarah prepared her flight gear for the next day's demonstration, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this point. Every cruel comment, every moment of humiliation, every lonely lunch in the high school library had contributed to her determination to become something greater. Tomorrow, she would return to Westfield not as the invisible nobody they had dismissed, but as Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, United States Air Force pilot, master of one of the most sophisticated aircraft ever built. The morning of the air show dawned clear and bright, perfect flying weather that filled Sarah with anticipation. She arrived at the regional airport before sunrise, beginning her pre-flight inspection of the AH-64 Apache helicopter that would be the centerpiece of her demonstration. The massive machine squatted on the tarmac like a predatory insect, its sophisticated weapons systems and advanced electronics representing decades of military engineering innovation. Sarah ran through her checklist with methodical precision, checking every system from the twin turboshaft engines to the advanced targeting computer. The Apache was worth over $30 million, a flying fortress capable of operating in the most dangerous combat environments on Earth. As she completed her inspection, Sarah felt the familiar surge of pride that came from being trusted with such an incredible machine. The air show wouldn't begin until afternoon, which gave Sarah time to consider her next move. The reunion dinner was scheduled for the same evening, held at the Westfield Country Club, where she had once delivered catering supplies with her grandmother. The irony wasn't lost on her that she might be landing a military helicopter on the golf course where she had previously been treated as invisible help. Around noon, as air show crowds began gathering at the airport, Sarah received an unexpected text message. Her grandmother had sent her a photo of the local newspaper, which featured a front-page article about the air show. The headline read, "Local Air Force pilot to demonstrate advanced Apache helicopter," accompanied by a professional military photograph of Sarah in her flight suit. The article mentioned that Lieutenant Sarah Martinez was a graduate of Westfield High School, class of 2015. It described her exceptional military career and her role as one of the youngest Apache pilots in her unit. The newspaper had somehow obtained details about her airshow performances across the country and her specialization in advanced helicopter combat systems. Sarah stared at the newspaper photo on her phone screen. The confident woman in the military uniform bore little resemblance to the shy teenager who had walked to school in worn shoes. Her posture was straight and commanding, her eyes clear and focused. The transformation was so complete that she wondered if her former classmates would even recognize her. As the air show commenced, Sarah prepared for her demonstration flight. She pulled on her flight helmet, its sophisticated heads-up display, and communication systems connecting her to ground control and other aircraft in the area. The Apache's engines whined to life, their twin turboshaft power plants generating enough energy to lift the 6-ton machine and its impressive arsenal. Sarah's demonstration began with a low pass over the crowd, the Apache's distinctive rotor sound causing spectators to look up in awe. She executed a series of precision maneuvers that showcased the helicopter's agility despite its size and weight. The machine could hover motionless one moment and accelerate to top speed the next, its advanced flight control systems responding to her commands with mechanical precision. The crowd's reaction was everything Sarah had hoped for. Children pointed excitedly at the helicopter, while adults shook their heads in amazement at the machine's capabilities. She performed tactical approaches and evasive maneuvers that demonstrated the Apache's combat effectiveness, all while maintaining the safety margins required for civilian demonstrations. After landing to thunderous applause, Sarah shut down the Apache's systems and removed her helmet. The demonstration had gone perfectly, but her mind was already focused on what would happen next. She had made her decision during the flight, watching the familiar landscape of her hometown spread out below her like a map of her past. Sarah changed out of her flight suit into her dress blue military uniform, complete with ribbons and decorations that told the story of her service career. The uniform was immaculately tailored, its sharp lines and precise details reflecting the professionalism expected of an Air Force officer. She looked at herself in the small mirror of the airport bathroom and barely recognized the reflection staring back at her. The drive to the Westfield Country Club took 15 minutes through streets that held countless painful memories. Sarah passed the high school where she had been tormented, the library where she had eaten lunch alone, the corner where she used to wait for the bus in bad weather. Each landmark reminded her of the girl she had been, but they no longer carried the emotional weight they once did. The country club's parking lot was filled with expensive cars that probably belonged to her former classmates. BMWs, Mercedes-Benzes, and luxury SUVs sat in neat rows under decorative lights strung between trees. Sarah parked her rented sedan among them and took a deep breath before walking toward the entrance. The reunion committee had decorated the country club's main ballroom with school colors and enlarged photographs from their senior year. Sarah studied the pictures as she entered, looking for her own face among the smiling teenagers. She found herself in the back row of the group photo, barely visible behind taller classmates, her expression serious and reserved. "Can I help you?" asked a woman at the registration table. Sarah recognized her as Jennifer Walsh, former student council president and one of Jessica's closest friends. Jennifer's expression suggested she was trying to place Sarah's face but couldn't quite manage it. "I'm Sarah Martinez," she said simply, watching Jennifer's eyes widen with recognition. "Sarah Martinez? Oh my God, I almost didn't recognize you. You look different." Jennifer's gaze took in the military uniform, the confident posture, the overall transformation that had occurred over the past 10 years. "What do you do now?" "I'm an Air Force pilot," Sarah replied. "I was in the area for an air show, so I thought I'd stop by." Jennifer's mouth fell open slightly. "You're a pilot? Like you actually fly planes?" "Helicopters, mostly. I flew an Apache demonstration at the air show today." Sarah's tone remained casual, but she enjoyed the shock spreading across Jennifer's face. Word of Sarah's arrival spread through the ballroom with remarkable speed. Former classmates who had never spoken to her in high school suddenly appeared with drinks in hand, eager to reconnect with a military officer who had once been invisible to them. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to barely concealed disbelief. "Sarah, I can't believe it's really you," gushed Brad Wilson, the former football star who now sported a receding hairline and an expanding waistline. His enthusiasm seemed genuine, but carried an undertone of surprise that bordered on confusion. "A pilot, huh? That's incredible." Sarah nodded politely, accepting congratulations from people who had made her life miserable for 4 years. She noticed how their treatment of her had completely changed now that she represented something they could respect and admire. The same people who had mocked her dreams of aviation now hung on every word about her military career. "I always knew you were smart," said Mark Chun, who had never acknowledged her existence in high school. "But I never imagined you'd become a helicopter pilot. That must be really difficult." "It has its challenges," Sarah agreed, resisting the urge to point out that he had never bothered to imagine anything about her future at all. Instead, she found herself genuinely curious about how their lives had unfolded. Some had followed predictable paths, others had surprised her with unexpected career changes or personal transformations. The most awkward encounter came when Jessica Thompson approached. The former Queen Bee of Westfield High looked exactly as Sarah would have expected. Perfectly styled, expensively dressed, radiating the same confidence that had intimidated everyone in high school. But there was something different in her eyes now, a wariness that hadn't been there before. "Sarah Martinez," Jessica said, her voice carrying its familiar tone of barely concealed superiority. "I heard you're in the military now." "How interesting." "It's been rewarding," Sarah replied evenly. "I understand you went into marketing?" "Yes, I work for a boutique firm in the city. We handle luxury brands, high-end clients." Jessica's response carried an edge that suggested she was trying to establish her continued superiority in their social hierarchy. "I suppose flying helicopters is exciting, but I've always preferred work that doesn't involve quite so much physical risk." Sarah smiled politely. "Everyone finds their path. I'm happy with mine." The conversation might have continued in the same vein, but it was interrupted by a commotion near the ballroom's main windows. Several people were pointing outside and talking excitedly about something in the parking lot. Sarah followed their gaze and realized what had captured their attention. The Apache helicopter sat in the middle of the country club's golf course, its rotor blades folded back for transport, but still imposing in its military precision. The machine looked completely out of place among the manicured lawns and decorative fountains, like a piece of advanced technology that had fallen from the sky into their suburban world. "Is that yours?" asked someone behind Sarah, and she turned to find most of her former classmates staring at her with expressions ranging from awe to disbelief. "That's my aircraft," Sarah confirmed. "I got permission to land here after the air show. It seemed more convenient than driving." The silence that followed lasted several seconds before the questions began. Everyone wanted to know about the helicopter's capabilities, its cost, her training requirements, her combat experience. Sarah found herself surrounded by people who had never shown the slightest interest in her thoughts or opinions, now hanging on her every word about military aviation. Could you show us the helicopter?" asked Jennifer Walsh, her earlier skepticism replaced by genuine fascination. "I mean, would that be allowed?" Sarah considered the request. The Apache was secure, and the country club grounds were private, so there wouldn't be any safety concerns about curious spectators. More importantly, she realized this was an opportunity to complete the transformation that had begun 10 years earlier when she left Westfield as an invisible nobody. "I suppose I could give you a brief tour," she said, "but we need to be careful. It's a military aircraft, not a tourist attraction." The entire reunion seemed to migrate outside, drawn by the prospect of seeing the helicopter up close. Sarah led the group across the golf course to where the Apache sat like a mechanical predator on the perfectly maintained grass. Even in the evening light, the machine was impressive, its angular lines and obvious weaponry giving it an aura of barely contained power. Sarah began what amounted to an impromptu air show ground display, explaining the helicopter's systems and capabilities to an audience that listened with rapt attention. She described the Apache's role in modern combat, its advanced targeting systems, its ability to operate in the most dangerous environments on Earth. Her former classmates asked intelligent questions and seemed genuinely impressed by her knowledge and expertise. "The Apache can carry up to 16 Hellfire missiles," she explained, pointing to the weapon pylons mounted beneath the aircraft's stub wings. "It's designed for precision strikes against armored targets, but it's also capable of providing close air support for ground troops in contact with enemy forces." Jessica Thompson stood slightly apart from the group, her expression unreadable as she watched Sarah command the attention of everyone present. The girl she had once dismissed as a nobody was now the center of attention, explaining million-dollar technology to an audience that treated her words with respect and admiration. "How fast can it go?" asked Brad Wilson, running his hand along the helicopter's armored fuselage. "Maximum speed is classified, but it's fast enough to get where it needs to be," Sarah replied with a slight smile. "The important thing isn't top speed anyway. It's about precision, reliability, and the ability to complete the mission regardless of conditions." As the impromptu tour concluded, Sarah's former classmates began to drift back toward the ballroom, their conversations filled with excitement about what they had seen. Several people asked for her contact information, expressing genuine interest in staying connected. Others simply thanked her for her service, their words carrying a sincerity that would have been unimaginable in high school. Sarah remained beside the Apache as the crowd thinned, taking a moment to process what had just occurred. The girl who had been ridiculed and dismissed had returned as someone worthy of respect and admiration. More importantly, she had proven to herself that the opinions of her high school classmates no longer held any power over her self-worth. Jessica approached as Sarah was preparing to leave. For the first time all evening, the former queen bee seemed uncertain, her usual confidence replaced by something that might have been regret. "Sarah," she said quietly, "I owe you an apology. The way we treated you in high school, it wasn't okay. You didn't deserve that." Sarah studied Jessica's face, looking for signs of insincerity, but finding only what appeared to be genuine remorse. "We were all different people then," she replied carefully. "High school brings out the worst in everyone sometimes. Maybe, but that doesn't excuse it." Jessica's voice was softer now, stripped of the theatrical superiority that had defined her teenage persona. "For what it's worth, I'm impressed by what you've accomplished. Really impressed." Sarah nodded, accepting the apology without quite forgiving the years of humiliation that preceded it. "Thank you. I hope you're happy with your life, too." As Jessica walked back toward the country club, Sarah performed her final inspection of the Apache before departing. The helicopter's systems checked out perfectly, ready for the flight back to base and whatever missions lay ahead. She climbed into the pilot's seat and began the startup sequence, the familiar routine grounding her after an evening filled with unexpected emotions. The Apache lifted off from the golf course with its characteristic whine, rising above the country club and the reunion that had provided such an unexpected conclusion to her journey home. As Sarah flew away from Westfield, she reflected on the girl she had been and the woman she had become. The transformation was complete, not just in the eyes of others, but in her own understanding of who she was and what she was capable of achieving. The lights of her hometown disappeared behind her as Sarah set course for home, knowing she would probably never return to another reunion. She had proven what needed to be proven, not just to her former classmates, but to herself. The nobody girl who had been ridiculed for dreaming of flight had not only learned to fly, but had mastered one of the most sophisticated aircraft ever built. The shy teenager who had eaten lunch alone in the library had become a confident officer trusted with millions of dollars of military equipment and the responsibility for protecting others. Most importantly, Sarah had learned that the opinions of people who had never bothered to know her real worth were ultimately meaningless. Her value didn't depend on their recognition or approval. It came from within, from the strength she had developed through years of adversity and the skills she had earned through dedication and hard work. She was no longer the invisible girl seeking validation from those who had dismissed her. She was Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, United States Air Force pilot, and that was more than enough.